In 1990, Scorsese's Goodfellas didn't just show the mob, it brought the mob straight onto the set. Real gangsters slipped into scenes, FBI files fueled performances, and actors crossed lines they never thought they'd survive.
How the f*** am I funny? What the f*** is so funny about me? Tell me. Tell me what's funny.
Even Scorsese admitted it felt too real. What they never told fans: making Goodfellas was just as dangerous as living it. For them, it wasn't just a movie. It was a crime scene in disguise.
You want some? Huh?
Oh, hey!
Based on a real book. Before Goodfellas became the iconic film we know, it started as Wise Guy, Nicholas Pileggi's explosive 1985 book about Henry Hill's life. The road from page to screen almost fell apart many times, nearly robbing the world of a masterpiece. Scorsese himself admits he almost missed it. After Mean Streets and Raging Bull, he was burned out on crime stories. When his agent sent the book, he didn't even open it. For months, it sat untouched. Then, after a failed studio project left him at a low point, Scorsese picked it up. He called Pileggi at 2 a.m., blurting out, "I've been waiting for this book my whole life." Pileggi replied, "I've been waiting for your call my whole life." But even with that perfect match, studios didn't want the film. Too violent, too dark, no hero, no redemption. Those were the complaints. Producer Irwin Winkler remembers fighting to explain that was exactly the point. Warner Brothers finally agreed, but lawyers nearly shut things down every week. The movie was based on real mobsters, many still alive, some even in witness protection. To protect themselves, names were changed, timelines shifted, and characters blended together. Still, Henry Hill couldn't resist sneaking onto the set, despite being banned for safety reasons. The script itself was built in a frantic, unusual way. Pileggi would share stories from his research, while Scorsese paced the room, shouting, "That's a scene!" The result was a movie shaped almost like a documentary, filled with cinematic energy. Wait until you hear which actors almost never made it into the film. The role he had to fight for. When you think of Goodfellas, it's hard to picture anyone but Ray Liotta as Henry Hill. But believe it or not, some huge names were thrown around before he got the part. Tom Cruise was the first name the producers mentioned, followed by Sean Penn. Even Alec Baldwin went in and auditioned, but he didn't make the cut. In the end, it all came down to Liotta, who at that point was still better known for Field of Dreams and his Golden Globe-nominated role in Something Wild. Liotta, though, wasn't just handed the role, he had to fight for it. He sent Martin Scorsese an audition tape, but Scorsese didn't even watch it at first. Then came a chance encounter in Venice. Scorsese was at the film festival, surrounded by bodyguards because of the controversy around The Last Temptation of Christ. Liotta tried to approach him, but the guards pushed him back hard, like they were ready to throw him out. Scorsese noticed how calm Liotta stayed and thought, "That's Henry." The character had to keep his cool in tough situations, and Liotta had just proved he could. After that, Scorsese finally watched his tape and liked what he saw. Still, there was another hurdle: producer Irwin Winkler. He wasn't sold on Liotta at all, and thought they could do a lot better. That changed one night in Los Angeles when Liotta bumped into Winkler at a restaurant. Instead of shying away, he walked right up and made his case. Whatever he said worked, because the very next day, Winkler called Scorsese and gave the green light. Once on set, Liotta admitted he was nervous, acting beside Robert De Niro. De Niro was a giant, and Liotta said it felt like the biggest challenge of his career. But after day one, De Niro reassured him, "Don't worry, this should all work out great." To prepare, Liotta listened to FBI tapes of the real Henry Hill. He noticed Henry was always snacking on chips and worked that into his performance. And behind the camera, Liotta carried his own pain. His mother passed away during filming. He channeled that grief into his role, especially the brutal scene where Henry beats a man for harassing Karen.
What are you doing?
Improv that shook audiences. Sometimes the most unforgettable moments in movies aren't even in the script. Take Goodfellas and its famous funny how scene.
It's just funny. It's funny, the way you tell the story and everything.
Funny how?
2 words, never written down, ended up terrifying audiences and changing film history. Ray Liotta still remembers it with wide eyes. That wasn't what we rehearsed. Not even close. The moment where Joe Pesci's Tommy goes from laughing to menacing in seconds came straight from real life. Pesci once told Scorsese a story about working in a restaurant as a young man. He'd called a mobster funny, and instead of laughing, the man's face turned cold. Joe thought he might die on the spot. Scorsese immediately saw it as a scene. But instead of scripting it, he asked Pesci and Liotta to improvise. The other actors weren't warned, so their nervous laughs and fearful glances on screen are completely real. This became the method for much of the movie. Scorsese often whispered conflicting directions to different actors before filming. Lorraine Bracco, who played Karen Hill, recalls getting one instruction while Ray got the opposite. The confusion built real tension that showed up perfectly on screen. Even the violence benefited from this approach. Pesci once asked to improvise a brutal scene in a single take. The shock you see in the cast's faces was genuine. For the crew, though, it was chaos. Script supervisor Dina Allen admitted it was nearly impossible to track dialogue or actions. It was like trying to document a hurricane, she said. Editing became just as wild. The famous montage of mob bodies turning up everywhere, cars, garbage trucks, freezers, wasn't planned. Editor Thelma Schoonmaker and Scorsese created it later in the editing room, realizing the impact of showing the aftermath all at once. The most demanding improvisation came during Henry Hill's drug-fueled final day of freedom. Scorsese wanted the audience to feel Henry's paranoia. So much of it was outlined rather than scripted. Ray Liotta even stayed awake for days, not on drugs, but with no sleep to capture Henry's unraveling state. Improvisation didn't stop with the actors. The real Henry Hill, in witness protection, kept secretly calling the set, giving Liotta tips on how he would act or speak. Ray quietly used those suggestions, blending real-life words into the role. Even the ending changed at the last minute. Instead of a traditional wrap-up, Scorsese rewrote it overnight, letting Henry break the fourth wall and talk directly to the audience. One take was all it took to make it real. Reality slipped into the script. One of the main reasons Goodfellas feels so real is because Scorsese and his team blurred the line between movie and truth in ways most films never dare. Take the moment when Henry first meets Robert De Niro's Jimmy Conway, who casually hands out $20 bills like candy. Normally, a scene like that would use fake money. But De Niro didn't like the way prop bills looked or felt. He wanted the weight of the real thing. So the prop master actually pulled $5,000 of his own cash for De Niro to use on set. After every take, no one was allowed to leave until each bill was carefully collected and counted. That small detail added tension not just for the actors, but for the crew too. It gave the scene a dangerous, lived-in edge you could feel. The blending of fact and fiction shows up again near the end of the film. Henry and Karen sit across from a United States attorney to discuss witness protection. That wasn't just another actor in the role, it was Edward A. McDonald, the very real attorney who had handled the case in real life. Scorsese originally went to McDonald's office just to study the space and recreate it on screen. But McDonald surprised everyone by suggesting he play himself. After a quick screen test, he was hired. Even better, the line, "Don't give me the babe in the woods routine, Karen," wasn't scripted.
I don't know anything.
Come on, you don't know anything. Don't give me the babe in the woods routine, Karen.
McDonald pulled it directly from his own memory of what he told Karen Hill decades earlier. It's one of those moments where the movie feels less like acting and more like history repeating itself. Ray Liotta, who played Henry Hill, also pushed for authenticity. He studied FBI tapes of the real Henry to copy his speech patterns, his pauses, and even the way he breathed. To top it off, Scorsese made it personal by including his own family. His mother shows up in a kitchen scene, and his father pops in during another. And there were other moments where the line between movie and reality blurred even more, far beyond what anyone expected. The day real mobsters showed up on set. Not only was the money or the attorney real, but Goodfellas went further. The directors and crew brought real gangsters into the edges of the production, sometimes by choice, sometimes by accident. Hollywood might have been making its version of mob life, but the actual mob wasn't far away. Assistant director Joseph Reedy remembers the unease. They'd just show up. No names, no explanations. They'd watch a scene, nod, maybe suggest something small, like a real wise guy would flick his cigarette this way. That's not how they'd count money. It wasn't a coincidence. Word spread about what Scorsese was filming, and people connected to the crew being portrayed suddenly took an interest. Officially, the film had law enforcement advisors. Unofficially, the most accurate advice came from unnamed visitors who always seemed to know the schedule. Ray Liotta recalled practicing Henry Hill's mannerisms when an older stranger approached. He told me Henry's nervous tic was in the left hand, not the right. I asked how he knew. He just said, "Me and him did business," and walked away. Never saw him again. Even iconic moments like the Copacabana tracking shot benefited from unexpected guidance. A kitchen worker pulled Liotta aside and showed him exactly how Henry had moved through the club because he had been there decades earlier. Lorraine Bracco, too, was approached in Little Italy by a woman who corrected her portrayal of Karen Hill, offering jewelry and style details only someone close would know. Costume designer Richard Bruno remembers quiet scrutiny. One visitor simply pointed at a suit and said, "Jimmy wouldn't wear that color." The team changed it instantly. Even De Niro's "never rat on your friends" scene had to be reworked after someone suggested Jimmy Conway would have been subtler. Joe Pesci, who grew up around that world, received calls from old acquaintances. They weren't threats, but strong suggestions to get things right. Producer Barbara DeFina stressed they weren't official consultants, just people who happened to visit. Still, it created a surreal mix. FBI advisors one day, mob-connected visitors the next. The prison cooking scene showed this tension clearly. Every detail, the razor-thin garlic, the meals, came from people who had lived it. Sometimes their advice even felt like a confession. Scorsese admitted that strangers would point out mistakes about crimes in ways only insiders could. The strangest moment came at the premiere. Some of the men portrayed, under changed names, sat in the theater watching actors play them. Afterward, a note arrived. "You got it right." Whether that was praise or a warning, nobody could say. Reluctant path of Tommy DeVito. Joe Pesci's road to Goodfellas wasn't as simple as it looks on screen. He ended up giving one of the most unforgettable performances in movie history, but at first, he didn't even want the part. Pesci was asked by Martin Scorsese to play Tommy DeVito, a character based on the real-life mobster Tommy DeSimone. Funny enough, Pesci had known the name Tommy DeVito long before the movie. He grew up friends with the Four Seasons, and their guitarist was also called Tommy DeVito. When Scorsese first approached him, Pesci was hesitant. He didn't see himself as the guy for the role. But Scorsese pushed, inviting him over to his apartment to talk it through. That's when Pesci shared a story that would change everything. He told Scorsese about a time he was joking with friends, and someone asked, "Funny how?" Pesci thought the line could be gold if added to the film. Scorsese agreed, and Pesci finally said yes, on the condition that a couple of his real-life stories made it into the script. But even after saying yes, there was another bump in the road. Scorsese later called him up. worried Pesci might be too old for the role, since he was thinking of making the characters younger. Not ready to let it slip away, Pesci tried on prosthetics and makeup to look younger. Somehow it worked, and Scorsese kept him as Tommy. Pesci then faced another challenge, the script itself. When he read the scene where Tommy kills Spider, the young bartender, he wasn't convinced. To him, the motivation didn't feel right. He even told Scorsese and Nicholas Pileggi that it didn't make sense. To settle it, Pileggi went straight to Henry Hill, who confirmed the scene really happened that way. Hill even wrote a note on the script to Pesci, saying, "Dear Joe, this is exactly what happened. Henry Hill." In the end, Pesci's dedication paid off. His performance as Tommy was chillingly accurate. Henry Hill later said it was 95% true to life. And when Pesci won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, he kept it short and sweet. His acceptance speech was only 5 words. "It is my privilege, thank you."
Oh, it's my privilege, thank you.
Technical risks that changed cinema. The magic of Goodfellas wasn't only in the story, it was in the way the story was told. Behind the scenes, the film faced technical challenges that had never been tried before, and those risks ended up changing how movies were made. Take the famous Copacabana shot. Henry walks Karen through the back doors, down hallways, past the kitchen, and straight to a table. In 3 minutes, no cuts. On screen, it feels effortless, but filming it was chaos. Cinematographer Michael Ballhaus recalled sweating through multiple failed takes. Every step had to be marked, every door timed, every extra choreographed like a ballet. One wrong move and the whole shot fell apart. But Scorsese wanted it done that way because it wasn't about showing off. It was about showing Henry's world bending for him, making the audience feel his rising power in real time. Then there was the helicopter sequence. Henry, coked out and paranoid, convinced he's being followed. To capture that madness, Scorsese shot everything. Close-ups of mirrors, food cooking, pills scattered, and helicopter blades. Editor Thelma Schoonmaker cut the footage faster and faster, so the rhythm of the edits matched Henry's spiraling panic. Sound design pushed it further. Snippets of dialogue would bleed in early, like Henry's racing thoughts jumping ahead. Music was another challenge, and it became one of the film's strongest weapons. Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas uses music almost like another character. The official soundtrack lists 12 songs, but the film itself features 43 tracks in total, including instrumentals. No film had ever leaned this heavily on popular music before. Clearing all those rights nearly broke the budget, but it gave scenes a pulse no score could match. The infamous pistol-whipping scene set to Donovan's Atlantis had to be synced beat by beat, with the footage even adjusted slightly so the violence landed on the music's crescendos. Even the makeup broke new ground. Instead of heavy prosthetics, the team studied real mobsters, how stress, drugs, and violence age people in unique ways. The production design also shifted with time. The glossy 1950s, the gaudy 1970s, each with its own color palette. Scenes that pushed actors to their limits. What made the performances in Goodfellas so groundbreaking wasn't just talent. It was the way the actors stripped away every trace of sentimentality. Scorsese explained it best. No one was softening their characters to win sympathy. These were people shown exactly as they were, and that honesty changed the rules of screen acting. Ray Liotta's Henry Hill was at the center of this shift. Liotta never judged Henry or tried to push him as good or bad. Instead, he played him as a man telling his own story with his own logic, leaving the audience to decide how they felt. That choice created something unsettling but real. Henry's joy at the lifestyle, the money, the access, the rush, wasn't weighed down by guilt. Most crime films tried to sprinkle in moral conflict. Henry had none, and Liotta made that chillingly believable. Robert De Niro brought a different kind of danger to Jimmy Conway. His menace wasn't loud, it lived in stillness. Scorsese pointed out that De Niro's power came from his eyes, the tiny flickers in his face. Jimmy barely raised his voice in the whole film, yet every scene carried weight. De Niro's immersion ran so deep, he even mimicked the way real mobsters handled money, stacking bills neatly, facing them in the same direction. It wasn't taught, he absorbed it naturally, as though Jimmy Conway lived through him. Lorraine Bracco's Karen Hill broke another mold. She refused to play Karen as a victim or just a decorative wife. Karen loved life, the excitement, the power, the belonging. She wasn't blind to what Henry did, she chose to accept it, even enjoy it. That complexity made her performance unforgettable. One famous moment comes when Karen hides a gun for Henry. She doesn't act horrified, she acts excited, almost loving the danger. Bracco insisted on showing that side, exposing truths most films would sanitize. Then there was Paul Sorvino as Paulie, redefining what mob leadership looked like. Instead of shouting or grand gestures, Paulie was all quiet control. Sorvino transformed his physicality to the point where he could make his eyes look dead. That stillness was scarier than any outburst. Together, these performances built a world that felt alive, like a documentary disguised as fiction. Legacy that changed Hollywood forever. When Goodfellas hit theaters, it didn't just succeed, it rewired filmmaking itself. Overnight, directors and writers started calling producer Barbara DeFina, not to pitch jobs, but to ask how it was done. The style, the voice, the rhythm. It felt like a new cinematic language had just been invented. The box office didn't scream blockbuster, but $46 million on a $25 million budget for a violent, morally gray story was still a win. Ironically, the same studio executives who once doubted Scorsese's choices suddenly claimed credit for backing him. As Scorsese later said with a sly smile, the very risks they feared became the industry's new standard. The film's storytelling approach had ripple effects everywhere. Before Goodfellas, voiceover was often seen as lazy exposition. After it, voiceover became a tool for character, irony, and distance. Techniques later used in House of Cards and The Wolf of Wall Street. Its fractured timeline, jumping forward and circling back, showed that non-linear storytelling could be mainstream. That gave confidence to projects like Pulp Fiction, which pushed the style even further. The impact on the cast was just as intense. Ray Liotta found himself typecast. Directors couldn't see him as anything but a gangster. Lorraine Bracco kept getting offers for mob wife roles, but without the depth she brought to Karen Hill. And Robert De Niro, already a giant, cemented his reputation for inhabiting characters so deeply that even how he stacked money felt authentic. Beyond the actors, the movie reshaped crime stories forever. Scorsese showed both the thrill and the cost of the lifestyle, the seduction alongside the destruction. That balance became the blueprint for The Sopranos, which expanded the same themes into television history. Visually, Goodfellas redefined grammar on screen. The tracking shots, freeze frames, and whip pans weren't just flashy tricks. They became essential tools, now studied in every film school. The soundtrack changed the game. Instead of background mood music, Scorsese used pop songs as storytelling devices, letting lyrics and rhythm comment on the action. Tarantino later built on that, but the groundwork was all here. Perhaps the clearest sign of its influence? Younger filmmakers. Nearly every major American director under the age of 60 cites Goodfellas as an inspiration. As film historian Peter Biskin put it, it's one of the most imitated movies of its era.